how can I ensure that the net result is fun for the pilots and safety for everybody? You know what I mean? And entertainment for the spectators. I think that's why we do get a decent amount of spectators, because we are mindful of that, of some entertainment value and the safety value aspect.
You're listening to the Drone Radio Show podcast, the show about drones and the people who use them for business, fun, and research. Hosted by Randy Goers.
Hello, everyone. This is Randy Goers, and welcome to the Drone Radio Show podcast, episode 61. Have you ever thought about joining or starting a local drone racing club? Then you're going to want to hear what today's guest has to share. Todd Wahl is a drone enthusiast and director of the Drone Racing Club in Atlanta. He's been flying drones since 2005. He helped form the Drone Racing Club, and he's been actively involved in advancing the sport of drone racing. He's here to talk about drone racing clubs, how they provide the structure and framework to introduce and nurture drone piloting skills, and how clubs like the DRC in Atlanta have a positive impact in the education, sports, and commercial industries. Let's pick up the interview where I asked Todd to introduce himself.
I'm Todd Wahl. I'm the founder of the Drone Racing Club. We're based out of Atlanta, Georgia. And our primary objective is to proliferate and promote this new burgeoning sport that is FPV, close proximity drone racing.
How long has the club been around?
A little over a year, I would say. About this time, early spring, I guess. It really came together at the last AUVSI conference. I've been toying with the idea of forming a club that would allow some of these FPV close proximity pilots and myself to get together and do more safe, responsible type of get-togethers.
Before you started the club, were you racing drones somewhere else in Atlanta?
I flew mostly independently and with a couple of friends here and there, just like everybody else did before there was any quote-unquote clubs. But I never was that super great necessarily. And the funny thing is I was like, okay, yeah, I'm going to start a club and I'm going to end up flying and having a great time and everything's going to be a bed of roses and I'm going to have all this time to fly. Well, if you're a club organizer, that's not exactly the case. I found out real quick. So,
when did you start flying drones?
I got into drones really early before anybody knew what a drone was. Matter of fact, I built my first drone back in 2005, first quadcopter. And I used to actually fly it downtown Buckhead area in Atlanta. It's kind of one of those little pocket suburbs that has high rises right off of 400 off the back parking deck of Phipps Plaza over the financial district. Over 400, if I did that today, somebody would tackle me and put me in cuffs. But anytime I flew that thing around, and it had a camera on it and everything, and actually, it was actually FPV enabled back then. I wasn't flying at close proximity. It was more like loitering, trying not to run into things. But it didn't have GPS or anything like that. It had auto level, what they called auto land at the time. Certainly not anything like what we're doing now, though.
Where did the idea of starting a drone racing club come from?
I guess it was about 3 years ago. I've been contemplating getting back into the drone business, commercial aspect. But with all the craziness with the FAA, I decided to do a lot of research and kind of figure out where could I fit as far as the commercial aspect. So I joined AUVSI. So that was last spring. I went to their symposium or their expo, but it was hosted here in Atlanta, where I'm from, and met a good buddy named Doug Arjwick, who actually runs a drone services for hire business out in Arizona. And he's also the founder of one of the largest drone users group out on the West Coast. And we chatted off and on for several days during AUVSI. Come to find out, in his club, he was doing some drone races for fun, just kind of in parks. And so we were talking about, FPV, close proximity, drone racing in general, talking about how it needed some direction to give people an outlet to go fly safely and responsibly. And that's what he was trying to do with his group out there. And I was like, that's exactly kind of what I was thinking that needs to happen too. And then we talked about the sport in its infancy back then and what it would take to maybe form a league and develop a set of guidelines that could help enable it to become something that would be more mainstream than RC cars or RC helicopters, or even more so than FIRST Robotics. And so from that, I immediately got on the phone with a buddy of mine, a business partner of mine, Daniel Gonell, who's my co-founder in the Drone Racing Club, and just kind of, hey, you know what? We need to start a drone racing league or a club or something. Well, during our push to do that and forming the club, Chris Thomas with MultiGP had reached out to me, and he was like, hey, I've already started a league down here in Florida, and we're trying to branch it out. Why duplicate efforts? Would you guys be willing to maybe contribute to the success of MultiGP potentially? And so we talked it over, and he definitely was a lot further ahead than us in the concept and the idea, and was moving down the road of exactly what we had thought. Hey, if this is going to be a legitimate sport, then it needs some sort of rules, regulations, specifications, guidelines, but also it needs some baseline grassroots structure, which is chapters and clubs, in my mind. So I relegated us to, hey, you know what? I don't mind not trying to organize something from the top down. I'm okay with organizing something from the bottom up. I agreed, hey, I'm glad you're going down that road, because that's a lot more time, money, and resources required to tackle that as a challenge. You know what? I'll just focus in on the club aspect and chapter level, the local. And I'm a businessman, so I try to set the stage for things to operate more like a business. So we put our heads together, me and Daniel, and started to try to structure, if we were to establish a club, what would that look like? And the main thing is having routine get-togethers, everything from organized events to swap meets, maybe educational workshop type of things, and try to get people interested in being involved on a routine basis. So we set up a meetup, and surprisingly, we had 30-something people show up to that first meetup to form the club and discuss what we were trying to do and the whole concept of what FPV racing could be in the future.
Besides your partner, Daniel, did you know any of the other pilots or individuals before you had that meetup?
Not personally. I knew a couple of guys in different parts of the Southeast that I had friended online through social media, again through YouTube. But actually, Steele Davis, Chris Braun, a couple of those guys, they actually showed up to that first meeting. But all my directors that I have for the Drone Racing Club is basically a formation of enthusiasts and pilots in combination, and some visionaries, right? And so, let's see, I think Ringo, one of our DRC directors, was there. Vivian Van Zyl, who's known as Funfly FPV Online, YouTube channel he's got, he was there. Chris Toombs, who actually is the founder of FPVlive.tv, was there. I don't know if Nick Holmes was there or not, but he might have been. Nick Holmes is another one. And then Lionel Volt came later.
Did you set it up with a formal structure, like a 501c3, or did you just leave it as an informal club?
Actually, we ended up establishing it as an LLC. We had talked about, ultimately, how do you structure a nonprofit? It's much easier to structure an LLC than it is to do a nonprofit. We did want to have some sort of formal structure, though. One of our objectives was to, hey, you know what? This club and the vision for the big picture for these members is this is going to be the first sport that you're going to be able to do as a hobby, as an individual, right? But also compete as an individual and potentially a team, so the competitive aspect. But also there's really some future commercial applications for FPV in close proximity flying. What I deduced at that time, all these guys that are flying on YouTube in close proximity or racing with each other, they don't realize it, but they've got a talent that can be used in the future for reconnaissance. Anything that flies below the tree line or below the roof line, mainly because these guys relish close proximity, right? As opposed to aviation up until now, period, across the board. Even drone-related aviation, fixed wing or multi-rotor, has all been about proximity avoidance, right? You know what I mean? The only time you want proximity closeness is when you're on approach to land. You know what I mean? And that's what the FAA is all about, is that safety concern and no proximity. They want miles between you and somebody else in the air.
So you saw drone racing as an avenue into some sort of economic opportunity.
So my thought was, hey, you know what? Timing's not right for me to get in the commercial aspect of this because I could spend, hundreds of thousands of my money and somebody else's money. And if the FAA hasn't got off their butt to do a line item exemption for small UAS or come up with some bona fide laws that are approved by Congress, they could pull the rug out from underneath me and whoever I partner with to do a commercial operation. And that was actually the sentiment, really. A lot of those guys that were at that meeting that I had met that were already into it or thinking about it, there was a real fear factor there about what, if anything, the FAA would do and how it would impact them as a business. Part of the issue, I think, too, is I think the commercial entity, meaning those that would potentially use drones as a service, were waiting, right? They weren't necessarily hiring drone operators internal and not necessarily enabling that because of the risk aspect. I said, I'll pull back. I'll do something I love, at least on the side to start off with, which is that FPV racing. Why not, right? Somebody's got to try to enable a safe, responsible type of drone racing event. At that time, there was nobody, at least that I knew of. It was mostly people just kind of loosely getting together, flying in small groups and nothing being actually managed or quantified back then, at least.
So you got the league started and then you became the club organizer?
I wouldn't say that I was an official multi-GP club organizer kind of thing. I just said, okay, I'm not going to go down the road of being a lead. Chris is doing a good job. And I told him, I was like, hey, let's chat. I'd love to contribute. And we chatted on a routine basis, still do, about the future of the sport, where we've come from, where we need to be, and how to get there. And so I feel like I've done my part as far as contributing in that respect. With, again, the end point being we've got to be serious about not falling short of where remote control cars or even remotely controlled airplanes and helicopters have been up to this point, not taken serious as a competitive sport. But you know what? It's different, though. Here's the thing. Here's the huge difference that I think needs to be laid out and made clear. And why it gets me so excited is because, like I said, it's three parts to this piece that has a formula for success in my mind. It's got a hobby element to it, meaning you can do it individually, but it's got the competitive aspect. The sporting element for sure is absolutely entrenched in it. And you see it every day with any of these drone races online or in person. And then it's got that commercial element. Here's the thing is, most sports, you're relegated to become a high school coach or walk away if you can with a blown out knee or a bad back. Good news about this sport is it's agnostic to almost age, sex, and abilities, honestly. You know what I mean? You don't have to be super fit. I mean, honestly, I hate to say it, but that's the truth. Actually, if you're flying in an open field, you'll do your fair share of walking. So there is a fitness level in it, especially if you got to retrieve your own quad. So the age piece, just to kind of bring that to the table. I mean, Luke Bannister's a perfect example, winning the World Drone Prix, 15-year-old kid. He's got some advantages, I think, without a doubt, over some of the old guys, but that's okay. He's been training for years on video games, right? And that's what we have to deal with. Matter of fact, we did our multi-GP state finals, and we had a 14-year-old kid who's only been flying for like 8-9 months via FPV, I should say, Robbie Van Zyl. He took third place, and he's come a long way. He flew us the first time, and we had to cheer him on just to make one lap 8 months ago at the Pecan Patch airstrip, famous general aviation grass strip that's also used as an RC field.
How many members do you have in the club now?
Registered members, anybody can be a member and not pay. We have paying membership, and then we get free membership. It's 178 total. But that's a combination of enthusiasts and active pilot.
What do you think were some of the things that helped your club grow from that first meetup to where it is today?
It has a lot to do with the hype train. The YouTube videos. I think a lot of people are drawn in to at least go figure out if this is something for them or not, based on the Star Wars video that was shot overseas in Europe, or Neil Davis's video, or Schizo's video, or Sharpoo's video. I think everybody wants to get that speeder bike in the woods, pod racing experience firsthand, right? That's what they relish. That's what they're looking for when they first come into either spectating, right? So we get a lot of enthusiasts and a lot of curious people that spectate at our events. I mean, it's been anywhere from 60 to 700, depends on where the event is. And then we get the question, hey, how do I get started and what do I buy? And so originally we used to say, hey, you know what? Hey, go find you a 250 racer and, go outside and practice or come to one of our meets and we'll show you how to do it, kind of thing. And we noticed that not everybody gets that enjoyment of the speeder bike in the woods to start off with. As a matter of fact, there's a lot of letdown. There's a barrier to entry, right? Especially if they don't have any first-person shooter experience. In my mind, that's a training platform, to be honest with you. So parents, all those hours that your kids are supposedly, quote unquote, wasting away at Xbox 360, they're actually muscle memory training for two-stick operation on a drone in close proximity, believe it or not. So we find that first-person shooter gamers are great at coming in and have a very low barrier to entry, or a former RC control, either plane or cars, tends to have a lower barrier to entry. If you're not one of those two, you're going to have a little bit of a challenge getting into it. So the barriers to entry are, do I know how to assemble, test, tune, and fly? That's one way to get into it, or buy ready to fly. But you still have to learn to repair it because you're going to crash it. Matter of fact, our t-shirts say build, fly, crash, repeat. I mean, that's how you become a good drone racing pilot. How to become a drone racing pilot. It's easy. Build, fly, crash, repeat on the back of the shirt. Anyway, kind of funny, but it's true. And so those individuals are fearful of crashing, then they're not going to do well. They're not going to go past that threshold, and it's going to be a problem. Those that don't fear crashing tend to advance a lot quicker. They're going to crash, and they're going to have to repair it. What we used to suggest, and we noticed that people are walking away from it because they embrace disappointment quicker. So what we've started to do is say, hey, matter of fact, Vivian Van Zyl, Funfly FPV, and I had talked about kind of those quandaries, right? Trying to get people started in the sport. It's kind of tricky. What do we suggest and how do they execute, either by themselves or with us? Well, we came to the conclusion real quick after Vivian started flying these ultra micro drones that, the ultra micro drones provide you the same training platform, right? In other words, it's still that two-stick operation 100%, even the same programming capabilities for testing and tuning, but has a lower barrier to entry as far as cost, speed, and velocity or mass. So it's less risky. If you're buying a 250, it's kind of risky. A lot of the fear factor from starting to fly FPV is, man, if this were to hit me or somebody else or something else, it could do some damage. And we've got these swinging razor blades, flying around. You don't want to put your finger in there while it's spinning. You will at least draw some good blood and maybe chip a bone, if not, remove your fingertip. Easy. But the ultra micros eliminate that, right? The risk. And the reward is high. The net result of an ultra micro starting out allows that newbie, whether they have experience or not, to embrace that speeder bike in the woods and that pod racing effect. Because at scale, it looks like you're going 100 miles an hour, to be honest with you, even though you're not.
Does your club provide any introductory training where people can learn how to fly and race?
As we start to do these routine, we typically would do a meet or a race, I should say, a full-on race that we would run a points-based race for multi-GP, usually, on the second and fourth Saturday of every month. Of course, that varies based on holidays. And so what we noticed was as people started getting into the sport, we would have a mismatch of groupings in a lot of these races where newbies were trying to learn and not getting off the ground too well. And we lacked the coachability there. We tried to coach them a little bit, but it's tough to run a race while you're trying to coach somebody. So we ended up with a trade-off. What we decided to do is start to do some get-togethers, some swap meets, and discuss what you need, and then also put on these kind of introduction to racing. We did probably our best introduction to racing that was full scale. I think we had like 20 pilots that showed up that were pretty much newbies. And we had some seasoned pilots that would sit down with them. We spent about an hour and a half, 2 hours talking about the rules, the regulations, the equipment, totally trying to fill them in If they already had that equipment, then, all right, guys, we set up the entire drone racing challenge course. We got a DRC challenge course that we made pretty simple and easy that is flyable. And we put them in the hot seat. We had somebody there to kind of spot and coach them at the same time. And we had some people that have never flown before, literally, and was doing a lap, or two. And that's what gets them kicked off. We've had several members early on that we ended up mentoring. Well, Robbie Van Zyl was one. We encouraged him. I mean, he wouldn't have made third place probably if we had not encouraged him maybe that day. I don't know. Robbie's pretty deterministic, so he probably wouldn't have let anybody get him down. But David Kraft is another one in our club that started off at a racing event and attributes that encouragement aspect of our group that enabled him to a really good, close proximity pod now.
Can you tell me what it's like to be the race organizer? From your standpoint, what are your typical responsibilities, the time requirements, and things like that?
There's a lot. And so anytime I see somebody that puts on a race, I can relate to, the time, money, and resource pressure that person has, if that's their role and responsibility. It's tough. And because it's new, we're always figuring out, the right ways of doing things and the wrong ways of doing things. The whole idea is to improve on that. I've got a big 12-foot closed trailer that we've collected assets, what I call race assets, that we use every time we go out. We've got dozens of air gates and air gate styles. We've got all the accoutrements to lay out a course with all the flags. We got tents for spectators, tents for pilot pits and flight lines and base stations. I mean, it's a lot of equipment that goes into doing a safe, responsible, and what I would consider more of a organized event that you wouldn't be ashamed to bring somebody to, kind of thing. It's not a backyard FPV meetup.
How's your volunteer support when you put on an event?
Man, I got to tell you, this community, I got to say, without a doubt, every race I've ever gone to, the pilots are among the best people that I've ever met in my entire life in every industry. I've worked in a lot of different industries, and these guys, without a doubt, are willing to contribute everything from time, money, and resources. I mean, it is incredible how wonderful this community is. So that's why I've kind of got the directors. The directors work together to try and help bring in volunteers and organize, and each director has a role and responsibility to help put on the race and execute so we can get a guaranteed result and an improvement on that result every single time. But you know what? We'll be unloading stuff, and the pilots that show up early before check-in, every last one of them. I mean, rarely do I have somebody that sits on the sideline, just sit there and watch us put it together. People are helping out, man, like you would not believe. So it's incredible, that type of community component to it. And that's the other thing that is cool and interesting about this sport is the variety. Like I was telling you, it's agnostic to age, it's agnostic to sex to a certain degree. I would like to see more females get involved. I honestly think they can kill it and they pick up on it pretty quick. And I certainly want to encourage young girls or women out there, pick up the controllers and try it out on a micro scale to start off with and move on. And let's give these guys a run for the money.
The club has been around now for about a year. What have been some of the ups and downs that you've had during this time?
I mean, weather is one of our biggest challenges for doing an event, I will say. Matter of fact, we put on one of the first Maker Faire drone races with the Atlanta Maker Faire last year. And we had this wonderful open course that they gave us in downtown Decatur, Georgia, right in the middle of, the police station was across the street. The courthouse was on the other side. And we had this huge swatch. I mean, it was a beautiful, almost a football field and a half that went through trees and everything. And the rain came through like crazy, and we were relegated to flying in a parking garage across the street for the race. So weather's one of the challenges when you do an event, even a practice day, unless you got an indoor venue. And then you've got another challenge, which is the technology aspect of the video. Analog video, although it's inexpensive, has an issue with limited space on the band, right? And how many pilots can fly at a time. And then, of course, the radio frequency weather, quote unquote, in a building or outside can absolutely affect your flyability. If you've got a lot of wireless routers or a lot of metal in a building that reflects the video signal and you get multipathing, or elimination on the video feed becomes a problem. And it's tough for those that fly indoors. So I'd say locations is one of the challenges, and the technology is another one of those challenges from a video perspective.
What does success look like? Or how do you know when things are going right?
The net result is we got pilots that have flown a lot of batteries, and we had some really good competitive races that created a good challenge for those pilots, but having fun at the same time. In other words, not making it too much of an obstacle course, right? We want to challenge the speed, agility, and skill of the FPV pilot, but not take away the fun, exciting, neck and neck, prop and prop racing element in my mind. And so if the pilots walk away saying, man, that was a good time, I had such a great time, or thank you for putting this on, which I got to say on a routine basis, we get that. Or when I do race registration and they say, okay, well, race registration is $12 and they give me 20 and say, just keep the change. You must be doing something right? The value proposition for them is higher than what my threshold is.
If someone came to you and said they were interested in starting a drone racing club, what would you tell them to make sure they get off to a good start?
In my mind, they would need to try and treat it like a business, instead of doing it loose and just trying to do impromptu get-togethers. You've got to put on events on a routine basis consistently and enable those pilots to have a good time. And that can be done a lot of different ways. I would say sign up on meetup.com is the first step. See if you can't point it as a drone racing club or something to that nature, or drone racing in general, right? Meetup. And I would post it on all the social media venues. That's how I got people interested in how the Atlanta crew, as they're known, ended up to my first meetup and have participated, every so often with us on a routine basis. And that's kind of what seeded it. I had everybody from families, meaning like mothers, fathers, and kids, to the oldest participant was like 60-something years old that day, with interest, right? But the other thing is once you got the interest, do a meetup. In other words, go meet at a restaurant, talk about what you want to try and accomplish, and figure out who amongst you are going to be those three pieces. Those enthusiasts, which are that are curious to find out more and maybe might cross the threshold of participating as a pilot or as a volunteer. So that's the enthusiast person, who can be a lot of different things in the future. The pilots that are, hey, I've been flying already, or I'm going to fly. I've got my equipment. I'm going to fly with you. And then you get the volunteers, the folks that want to contribute to the success of the gatherings and the execution of the races. You've got to have all three elements, though, honestly. Otherwise, it doesn't work out. Volunteers are key, I will say, because you can't do it by yourself. If I didn't have the DRC directors, there is no possible way I could do it on my own. They are so key. The volunteer group, the folks that are dedicated their time, money, and resources to providing the opportunity to these pilots to fly, and the opportunity for the spectators to partake. Because, that's the other part of it is too. And I would encourage those folks that are looking to start a club, don't forget the enthusiasts and don't forget the spectators. When I say enthusiasts, could be spectator too, is we need to embrace those folks. And we need to represent ourselves responsibly. You need to be thinking about safety. You need to be thinking about checklists on how can I ensure that the net result is fun for the pilots and safety for everybody. You know what I mean? And entertainment for the spectators. I think that's why we do get a decent amount of spectators, because we are mindful of that, of some entertainment value and the safety value aspect. And be good stewards, right? You know what I mean? Here we are, we're representing drones as a whole. We don't need more yahoos that are flying over crowds or, you know what I mean? Or close to people or crashing into somebody's car. We don't need that kind of stuff. But we do need people that are mindful of the value of representing our sport and drones in general as a good thing.
How do you think the public feels about drone racing clubs like the DRC?
The vast majority of them have embraced us really, really, really well. Anytime we go do an event, the curiosity, people jogging by, if we're out in a park area or in a public area, they want to find out more. And so we specifically have folks that are in our club that I have said, hey, if we get a spectator, I want you to go over to them and educate them on us flying these things, on the good components of it, right? The intrinsic value that can influence STEM in schools, right? The sports and competitive aspect of it, the hobby component of it, commercial element of what a close proximity FPV pilot would be in the future. You know, that reconnaissance person that flies below the tree line or in an urban environment below the roof line, the pipeline inspector, and then the light turns on for them and they're like, oh, wow. I thought they were just there to take pictures or were there to drop bombs on us. Well, no, there's more to it and more good to it than what you're thinking about that the media deploys.
Being a race director is a lot of work. So why do you do it? Where does your drive for this come from?
I certainly don't get to fly. I mean, I haven't flown my full-size quad probably for 2 months now, and it needs to be repaired. That's the bad thing about it is time's always not a friend of mine. I actually relish and love to see these guys go out and fly. And I love the concept of what FPV drone racing can be and I believe will be as a sport. And I feel wholeheartedly that it needs to be in the schools for the science, technology, and engineering and math application in its essence, but also the fun and competitive stuff that doesn't set the kid up to walk out of there with a bum knee or a bum back and have the potential of turning that fun, competitive experience into a job, becoming that pipeline inspector or that person in the military that would do the reconnaissance or intelligence gathering or building inspection. And so that kind of passion for me kind of fuels that fire. Like I said, it has to be some of the best people, some of the most intelligent, most friendly, most compassionate people I have ever met has been through drone racing, honestly.
For the future, what sort of goals do you have for this club and for yourself?
You know, I spend more money than I bring in for this kind of stuff. And, you know, as a businessman, I have yet to find out 100% the break-even point. I feel like I've got, you know, the concept down of what a club is and should be and creating some stickiness with the club members to giving them an outlet and then a value proposition for that, right? You know what I mean? These organized, fun experiences that you're not going to be able to pay $20 at an arcade for and hopefully draw people in. So I guess my end goal, I would like to see the drone racing club mature to the point that we have what I would consider a club or a chapter in a box solution, like a turnkey piece where I already know what the workflow elements are. I pretty much know what the assets need to be as far as the base costs to the extreme costs are concerned. All I'm working on is the sustenance model, honestly. And it's a work in progress. I haven't got the nut cracked yet 100%, but I'm not far from it to enable somebody to go out there and create a self-sustaining club that knows how to pull in sponsorship locally, knows how to put on events safely and responsibly that is both fun for the pilots and entertaining for the local folks to go see. Because I think it requires both parts to enable the sport. And it needs to happen at the local level first before there can ever be a bona fide league or an association that it can draw from. Because, I mean, without the local community piece and organized effort at the local piece, this won't last, I don't think. So that's my small part of contribution, really. It's a bigger picture thing, honestly.
Todd, we talked about a lot of different aspects of the Drone Racing Club. Is there anything that we missed that you'd like to share?
One thing that makes the sport unique that I did not mention is it embraces both sides of the social spectrum, okay? So we get the geeks, the nerds, the IT guys, which are kind of like me, right? And they love it for the technical aspect, the technology that's currently here and the potential technology coming down the tubes. And that, we've got that group of people. And then we've got the adrenaline junkies, the guys that are the former motocross guys, sports, guys that love the competitive aspect of it, sitting right next to those geeks and nerds. If you go to any of the drone races and you look at the swatch of people, you can see real quick the tatted up earring dude right next to the geek, that has the bed head and the glasses. And they are palling around with each other. no other sport, I think, doesn't embrace in the same way, that kind of thing. So it's got some unique elements to it that, if fostered right, has the potential of challenging traditional sports. I mean, who can dispute the beauty of having an augmented reality experience, right? The best of both worlds, what I say, is the virtual component, like the headset, the VR component, that projects the image as if you're sitting in the cockpit or the pilot's position, in combination with knowing that you're actually controlling something in the real world, but without all the risk. You see what I'm saying? I will tell you that one initiative that we pushed through this last year, I've been trying to get high schools and colleges to jump on the STEM initiative, the intrinsic value of close proximity FPV, not only racing, but challenges to mimic real world scenarios commercially and the racing aspect. And so we worked with some folks at Georgia Tech to establish the first drone racing club. And actually an up-and-coming racer, Nick Willard, who's one of the top guys there, him and Dimitri are one of the founders of the first Georgia Tech drone racing club. That's fostered some attention from NASA and Georgia Tech to help bring drone challenge clubs to your colleges and high schools, like STEM-based high schools. And that looks like that's going to become a reality. Matter of fact, we're going to be doing one of the first beginner boot camp style introduction to FPV drone racing at West Georgia Tech in partnership with NASA and Georgia Tech, actually. The students will 3D print a frame, they'll assemble the parts, and they'll test tune, and actually they'll do a challenge where we'll mock up a pipeline inspection or a reconnaissance mission or a search and rescue mission and do a race at the end of it, which is kind of cool. I feel like that's an achievement to getting schools to accept the possibility of these drone challenge clubs and competitive clubs. As a matter of fact, Georgia Tech is going to change their club from a social type of club, after school type club, to a competitive sports club. So they get more funding and they get more backing from the school if it's that categorization. We're hoping to get that done this fall. We'll see. So that's interesting stuff.
That's it for episode 61 of the Drone Radio Show. I hope you enjoyed hearing from Todd Wahl and learning about the Drone Racing Club. I want to thank Todd for sharing his experience. If you want more information on the Drone Racing Club or want to connect with Todd, check out the website at onedrc.com. You can also check out the multigp.com website to find a drone racing club near you. If you enjoyed this episode, please leave a positive review on iTunes. It really does help. And as always, I hope you'll listen to more episodes of the Drone Radio Show podcast to hear how others are using drones for business, fun, and research. For the Drone Radio Show, I'm Randy Gores.
This has been the Drone Radio Show podcast. More information on today's show can be found on our website at www.droneradioshow.com. If you're using drone technology for business, fun, or research and would like to share your experience on the show, please visit our website and fill out a guest appearance application. And don't forget to follow us on your favorite social media channels.